And we invited Sean because he's been a little down about his election loss, hasn't been out of the house, had let his beard grow. So we invited him to the thing tonight, just so he'd have to clean up and shave and get himself out here. So we appreciate getting Sean out here tonight. Healthcare, as you know, is a big deal. From 2008 or 2011 with Obamacare, 2.7 trillion up to 4 trillion in total spending. If the prices of these commodities had increased as fast as healthcare since 1945, a dozen eggs would cost $55. A gallon of milk would cost $48. And a dozen oranges would cost $134. Here's since 1996, here's what's happened to here's healthcare here. The only thing really worse, and Sean here represents the worst as well, is college tuition has gone up by almost 200% along with textbooks. And I think Sean sells textbooks as well. But we're going to talk about healthcare tonight because Sean has become an expert on healthcare economics. He's a professor of economics, a conservative professor. There is one other conservative professor at the entire Claremont colleges, one other. So Sean is doing his best there. And he ran for Congress, was not successful, but actually may have a more important role in promoting free market healthcare. He has a book coming out, The Cure That Works, How to Have the World's Best Healthcare at a Quarter of the Price. And with that, I will turn it over to Sean. Thanks for being here, and thanks for shaving.
I'll try and keep these comments brief. Some of you have already heard me talk about healthcare extensively. But before I do, I want to say thank you to everyone in this room. I had so much support from the Tea Party this last campaign, and it didn't turn out the way we wanted it to. But I am deeply, deeply grateful to everyone in the room, the board members, and everyone who volunteered. Lupe, I see so many of you out there, the Hausers. Thank you very much. So the reason, though, I ran for Congress was I was getting so frustrated about the fact that neither party was doing anything about free market healthcare. And it turns out there's a lot you could do, much more than you could possibly imagine, because you haven't been told about it, right? So I briefly want to just sort of lay out here what is not just possible, but I can point to US examples, like so the way the state of Indiana runs its Medicaid system, Whole Foods Markets, the supermarket chain, the way they do their health insurance employees for their employees. Everything I'm about to tell you has already been proven to work here in the United States. We invented all this stuff, it's just that we're not using it in most places. And it's very frustrating because nearly everything I'm about to tell you is completely 100% legal under current law. Like you wouldn't even have to repeal and replace to do this stuff, right? But no one wants to do it. And on top of that, as I'll explain, and I'll try and keep this quick, there is no profit incentive for the insurance companies to actually do these things, right? Because there are a lot of people right now making unbelievable profits in the healthcare system, right? And you know, we've got some medical doctors, I see nurses, I know there's a lot of people here. The people who are actually on the ground, like Dr. Broom here, Dr. Wong, where are you? Okay, our medical people, our doctors, nurses and everything, best in the world, right? What we've screwed up is our system for financing healthcare, right? We've got a lot of really bad incentives. We've got much more socialized central planning than most people are aware of. There's almost centralized price controls in the United States. There's this DRG system where Medicare and Medicaid set reimbursement rates, and then private insurers just basically copy them. So we've got amazing amounts of central planning now. And as a result of that and these just a few bad incentives, we're spending way, way, way more than any other country on healthcare. And Greg had that great chart with the arrow and how much our healthcare expenditures have gone up in the last, it was probably about 15 years. But what you can't see there, oh, another one back? Actually, yeah, I want the one with the bars. One more, yeah, this one, thank you. And by the way, Greg made all these slides, not me, so thank you very much. What you can't see here, since this is only for the United States, is just how much more we are spending than other countries on healthcare. And so let me put it in perspective here. We are currently spending 18% of our national income on healthcare in the United States, or technically 18% of GDP, gross domestic product. Canada, England, France, Japan, every other developing country you can think of pretty much is between 10 and 12. And that's why Bernie Sanders gets excited about, you know, let's do Medicaid, Medicare for all, or single payer, or let's copy England, let's copy Canada, because we're at 18%, and Canada and England are about 10. And so, yeah, well, we'd save a boatload of money. There's one country in the world, it's way on the other side of the world, that actually copied all our best ideas and put them into practice all at once. They are currently spending only 4.2%. They're spending less than half as much as Canada, England, and all the socialist countries that one of our major parties is telling us now, well, that's where we need to migrate to, right? And so, but let me tell you how much money that actually is, right? When I say we're spending 18% and we probably should be spending about 5%, well, that difference, 18 minus 5, is 13% of national income. And I've got to tell you, that's a tidal wave, a tsunami of money. So to put that 13% in perspective, last year, every Social Security check that went out from the federal government, both to retirees and to SSDI, the disability, the younger people, was only 5% of GDP, right? So when I say there's 13% that we're wasting that we could do something else with, it's a tidal wave of money. Last year, the entire defense budget was only 4% of GDP, right? Little known statistic, if you wanted to balance the Social Security Trust Fund, it would only take 1% of GDP each year, right? Well, I just found 13%, $2.4 trillion a year that we've wasted, that is not going to good people like Dr. Wong and Dr. Broom that actually deliver health care, but is going to bureaucrats at insurance companies, that's going to pharmaceutical companies, device manufacturers, lots of pigs at the trough, right? And so let me identify first the fundamental problem, and why is it we are spending 18% when no one else is spending more than 12? Okay, we have this uniquely screwed up healthcare system. And it all started in World War II, and actually, is there anyone, do we have anyone old enough to be a World War II vet? No? Okay, so, no, it's too bad. My dad was, but he passed away too. So that generation, unfortunately, is going. But in World War II, there was price rationing. There were ration coupons for everything, right? The government had to lock down prices because they didn't want anyone profiteering, exploiting anyone. And what this meant was that you couldn't pay high salaries to workers to attract them to work at your company because all wages were fixed. You couldn't offer anyone a raise. And this mattered because Henry Kaiser of Kaiser Steel and Aluminum and Kaiser Permanente, he had a contract to build Liberty boats for the war, and he needed literally tens of thousands of people to move out from places like Detroit and Flint, Michigan to work on his West Coast shipyards. And he couldn't give them higher wages because that was illegal during the war to change anyone's wages. So he accidentally stumbled upon giving them a fringe benefit, healthcare, right? He was the first to offer free healthcare to his workers. By the end of the war, almost every major company had copied them, and that just became a tradition. So we're the only country in the world where your health insurance is tied to whether or not you work for a company that offers health insurance, right? And it's the only country in the world where you have to worry if you get fired, what's going to happen to my family and the health insurance, right? We have this uniquely crazy system. It's also a system in which people, in a very socialist way, are not allowed to participate. They're excluded, there's central planning, you don't see costs, there's no, what economists like to call price transparency. I prefer just saying there's no price tags, right? Has anyone recently gone in for something fairly major, maybe an overnight stay at the hospital? Did they tell you how much anything was going to cost in advance? No. You get a bill 3 months later, right? With crazy, insane numbers and then some line that says you pay this amount, right? So we've created this system where people aren't even allowed to see the prices ahead of time, which means the doctors don't have to compete on prices, right? Like, how many of you would have ordered here food tonight if they didn't print the prices on the menu and they wouldn't tell you, right? But that's what we do in healthcare, right? How many of you would go to, say, a Ford dealer, you want to buy a new truck, and the dealer tells you, hey, take this one you love, just drive it off here, and 3 months from now, we'll tell you how much it's going to cost, right? But that's actually what we do in our healthcare system here, right? People can't even see the price in advance. There's no competition. Most people, they don't know what the premium is on their health insurance because their employer's paying for it, and it's now completely out of control. The average family premium in America this year hit $20,000, right? So for any of you out there running businesses and having to get health insurance for your employees, you're paying $20,000 an employee if they've got family, right? If you want to know where all the middle-class manufacturing jobs went and why middle-class wages have stagnated since the 70s, it's the healthcare system. All the money that should have been going into wages and salary increases, money that companies could have reinvested in better plant and equipment to compete with the Chinese, that all went into our healthcare system, which is basically a giant cancer sucking resources away from the rest of the economy. And so, you know, when I first started looking into this stuff, I was shocked to find that if you just get a few incentives correct, everything else takes care of itself, right? You get Adam Smith's invisible hand, and we would be down around 4 or 5% of national income instead of 18. So let me tell you what Mike Pence did back when he was governor of Indiana, right? And this is very counterintuitive, but as you see, they created a system of Medicaid, right? And Medicaid is our joint federal state program for people of lower incomes, right? You have to be pretty not well off to be able to qualify for Medicaid, right? There's lots of problems with Medicaid, so please don't think anything I'm about to say is defending Medicaid, right? Medicaid is so bad in this country that if you look at health statistics and surgery outcomes, people without insurance actually do better than Medicaid recipients, because the government reimbursement rates are so low, they can't get quality doctors, and the wait times are ridiculously long. So Medicaid actually kills people, even though it's meant to save people. And one of the big problems with our system, you know, in insulating people from prices, not being able to tell in advance what things cost, people just stop really paying much attention to what anything costs, right? A bill comes 3 months later, and you're like, well, I gotta pay this. Maybe I'd call them once in a while to negotiate. But what you need to do is put people back in touch with, oh my God, is money being wasted here? And the way you do that, and this is just pure capitalism, Andrea Cortez wouldn't approve of it, right? You give average, ordinary people skin in the game. You know, and what I'm about to tell you is a very Republican, very conservative worldview that we think people can run their own lives. We don't think you need a centralized totalitarian government telling you what to do all the time. And so here's the deal. Mike Pence, normal Medicaid in every state works as follows. It's first dollar coverage, right? The government pays for the first dollar, second dollar, third dollar. As much as they're going to spend on you for healthcare in the year, 100% is on the government. What Mike Pence said is, well, that gives people no incentive to save money, right? In the same way a teenager spends their parents' money much more aggressively than their money they have to earn at a summer job, if you give people no incentive to save money, they treat it like someone else's money, they just waste it. And so what he said was, let's actually trust people. Let's make a special version of Medicaid that has an annual deductible, and they set it at $1,100. But here's the trick. They create a health savings account from everyone, and the government gifts them the $1,100. And the government tells them, every year you're going to be in Medicaid, you know, we hope you get a better job and you move up in the world, but any year you're still in Medicaid, you're going to get $1,100, $1,100, $1,100. You're going to get the amount of the annual deductible every year, which means you're 100% financially protected, right? Because there's an $1,100 deductible, but they just gave you the money to pay for that if you need to. Everything above $1,100 is on the government, right? Because it's an insurance program. But what you have when you give people the $1,100 and you tell them any money you don't spend, you get to keep, and it rolls over to the next year, it's your money, spend it wisely. Believe it or not, 35% instant cost savings. People, when they're spending their own money, spend it much more wisely. They're still going in for mammograms, they're still going in for annual checkups, they're doing all the preventive maintenance, but you know, when they have a choice now, because that first $1,100, it's their money, we gave it to them, and if their choice is between, oh, I got a softball injury, should I get the low-cost x-ray first or just go right to the MRI? All of a sudden now, when it's their own money, they're like, let's do the low-cost thing first, and then if that's inconclusive, you know, we'll get the more expensive thing. With brand name drugs versus generics, right? When people are on HMOs and PPOs and normal insurance where, you know, there might be a $5 per prescription charge, in those situations when they have a choice between a brand name drug and a chemically identical generic, 93% of the time when it's other people's money, they'll go for the brand name drug. As soon as you give them this kind of system I'm telling you about, where there's an annual deductible, but you give them the amount of the annual deductible, they go from 93% of the time choosing the brand name drug down to only 13%, right? Because they say, oh my God, this is my money. I want to be healthy, but why should I waste money on the brand name? I'm going to conserve my money. And so just by giving people that one incentive, you instantly cut healthcare costs 35%. And it's not just there. I could point to Whole Foods Markets. The way they have their insurance system looks exactly like this. There's an annual deductible, but the company just gifts every worker the amount of the annual deductible. You get a 35% reduction in healthcare spending. And what's amazing about that is you get something that looks like the Laffer curve, right? Which we all know about taxes. If we lower tax rates, there's actually more business activity and the government actually collects more money, right? This is a very right-wing way of thinking about things. But here, what happens is that 35% cost savings more than pays for the money you're gifting people into their health savings account every year, right? There's like a 12% net savings, right? And this can be done system-wide. And what you then need, though, is people to have price tags, right? In that little country I told you about earlier that copied all our best ideas and is spending only 4.2% of their national income on healthcare, that's Singapore. And if you go to a hospital or clinic in Singapore, there's literally menus of prices everywhere. And those are the real prices, not like the nonsense prices we get on bills here with, $25 for a Tylenol. So say you need a knee surgery. You could call up every orthopedic surgeon in Singapore and they give you a price quote. The government then gives you quality data for each doctor so you know who's good and who's bad, not just who's charging a lot and who's charging a little. And there's super intense competition there because the doctors know you've got money in your health savings account and you want a bargain, you want high quality at low prices, and so there is incredibly ruthless competition in that healthcare system for everything. By contrast, we only have ruthless competition for things that are not covered by insurance. So these are elective procedures, right? Cosmetic dentistry, cosmetic surgery for your face, LASIK eye surgery to correct nearsightedness. These things insurance won't pay for. So those doctors in our country right here, there's super intense competition, right? You can go online and find out that you could get LASIK done for $500 with a Groupon, right? Because those doctors have to do marketing, they have to do advertising, they have to do sales, they need to compete with each other. Does your cardiologist have to do that? He sends you a bill 3 months later. Is he really interested in competing with the next cardiologist? Is your podiatrist, is the person who puts in your hearing implants? No, right? Because there's no price tag. So the other thing we need here is price tag system-wide. And how many Donald J. Trump fans are there in the room? Trump is doing this. Starting this year, all the hospitals and all the providers are going to have to post prices. They're going to be publicly available, and you could compare online. So Trump gets it, right? If you give people the information to comparison shop, they'll comparison shop. And let me just tell you how much cost savings there is. So my dad, he had me very late in life. He was born in 1925. He was actually one of the World War II vets. At the age of maybe 75, he needed a quintuple bypass, right? And they had health insurance through Kaiser and VA and everything else. So he goes in for surgery, and what he kept telling me was like, God, this is so expensive. This is so expensive. This is crazy, and we don't get the prices in advance. And then they tell us, 3 months later that it was $200,000 or $300,000, and his actually billed out at I think $140,000 was, and who knows what's going on with the money behind the scenes, right? But that was what was on the official sort of bill. To put that in perspective, that's a pretty typical amount. I looked up information for the United States. The average open heart surgery here cost about $130,000. Guess how much it is in Singapore where there's intense competition? No government subsidies. So it's, any guesses? $18,000. Yeah. And to put that in perspective, the average cost of a new car in America last year was $36,000. So they've got such intense competition that an open heart surgery there costs half as much as Americans pay for new vehicles here, right? That's life transforming, right? How many families have $130,000 lying around to pay for surgery? Virtually no one. On the other hand, how many families could put $18,000 on installment payments over 5 years and just deal with it, right? Almost everyone, right? If you got a job, right? And so these things are so simple, right? Price tags, right? That's another technology Americans invented, and I'll wind this up in just a second. Believe it or not, the price tag had to be invented. It was invented in 1860 by a guy named John Wanamaker. If any of you are older and grew up on the East Coast, you might have remembered a chain of 5 and dimes called Wanamaker's, right? Originally, though, he had the only department store in Philadelphia, and he was this marketing genius. He invented the price tag, then he invented the money-back guarantee, and he also had the first, patented advertising, so there was truth in advertising, and you could challenge his prices and all this stuff. But he invented the price tag because he was a Quaker, right? Society of Friends. They really believe in equality among people, equality among men, women. And he thought it would be really unfair in the eyes of God if one person got a lower price than another simply because they were a better negotiator. And he said, that's not fair. I'm going to put a price tag on every item. That's the price for everyone, right? And it soon spread like wildfire. And we, of course, all grew up with price tags. It's kind of weird thinking they had to be invented, right? But this is a very, very useful technology because it eliminates so much waste, right? How many of you have ever gone to like a third world country and wanted to buy like a blanket at an open air bazaar or a lamp or something, right? It could be Cancun, Mexico, wherever. Is that a quick process? No, minimum 20 minutes, right? If you want to make a serious negotiation, right? Imagine if you had to go into Walmart and there were no price tags and you had a 20-minute negotiation for every single thing there. That was the world before John Wanamaker invented the price tag, right? And guess what? With our healthcare system, we're still living in pre-1860 with no price tags, right? And it just leads to massive waste. And where the negotiation there is actually between your doctor and the insurance company, because you go into your doctor, like I could go to Dr. Broom and he'd look at some x-rays for me and maybe there's a break or something. That's he's a radiologist. Is it Bear Medical Group? I shouldn't maybe mention names. Some medical group with a large animal, right? What happens then is they would send a bill to my insurance company. And the reason it takes you 3 months for you to get anything is there's a 3-month battle between the providers who are saying, look, I delivered good service to Sean, pay me this amount. And the first thing the insurance company will do is deny the claim and say, we're not going to pay anything. And then there's a 3-month negotiation. It's actually barter. It's actually that situation in a market in a third world country where you have to go back and forth, and you have to pay people to do the negotiation. And just how wasteful this was brought to my mind a few years ago. I had to go in, and many of you have heard this story, and I have a laugh line in here. We'll see if you laugh too. But I had to have this little thing removed from my neck, right? And I was living in Upland at the time. I live in Redlands now. And I went to San Antonio Hospital over there, and there was a doctor who did big surgeries in the hospital, but everything else outpatient. He had his own little thing across the street. I go into his office. He's probably about 50 years old. There's a woman about his own age who's running the office, right? Not just, I'm sure she paid the taxes and paid the rent, and, she was the one on the phone scheduling. But then I asked him, Doc, there's 2 younger women here in your office. What do they do? Because they weren't nurses, right? They weren't doing anything that was actually healthcare. And he said, oh, those 2 young ladies, their full-time job is to deal with insurance forms and pre-approvals on drug prescriptions. And I went home thinking, oh my God, we've created a healthcare system for every provider, right? The only one in that office actually doing healthcare was the doctor. He needs to be backed up by 2 people who are shoving insurance forms out the door. That's 2 full-time salaries, 2 sets of benefits, right? To run the negotiation with the insurance company. And that was bad enough, but then I woke up the next morning realizing, oh my God, it's even worse, because if there's 2 people at his office shoving forms out the door, there's got to be 2 people at the insurance company processing it on that end, right? So we've created a healthcare system where each provider, on average, requires 4 other people to do this insane negotiation, which you wouldn't have to do if they just put up a price tag and you could say, yeah, I'm going to use that doctor at that price. In the same way you can walk into Walmart or Target and comparison shop and know what everything costs, Donald Trump is going to deliver that to you, okay? 2011, and I'm about to praise Mr. Pence as well. 2011 is when the state of Indiana, and Mike Pence back then was the governor, did that Medicaid system I told you about where you gift them the amount of the annual deductible. He has brought in the people who designed that. They're now at the Department of Health and Human Services, actually a particular woman named Seema Verma. And so they are ready, I believe, to work on healthcare reform very seriously. Trump's going to make it a big issue this next election cycle. My guess is it's going to be immigration and healthcare. The Democrats don't care, you know, the argument will be Democrats don't care about poor people, right? Because if you want wages to stay high, you can't take 1 million illegal immigrants a year, right? If you want people to have higher take-home pay, you can't keep raising the cost of health insurance premiums 10, 15% a year, right? Donald Trump will actually say he's going to help the average guy and he's going to have things to show on it. And so I'm very excited now that I can be part of that debate. You know, I ran for Congress because I wanted to be on the committee that actually does the healthcare stuff and be part of the reform. So unfortunately, of course, I didn't win the seat here in the 31st, but I did get enough popularity among Republican elected officials that they know who I am now and are prone to listen. So I've got this book here, and I only have 36 copies. What I'd like to do, I want to do two things. So first, for some of you, I'm just going to give it to you for free, but there's a catch. And let me tell you what the catch is, okay? And then the rest, I would actually like to auction off. And the reason I want to do that is because every year you hear... What?
What happened to price tags?
Oh, no. Okay. Never trust a politician. Okay. So what I want to do, because you guys have this great event every year where there's the essay contest for the high school kids, right? And you want to give cash prizes for the scholarships. So one thing I'd like to do is just auction off a few of these, and then all the money will stay with the Tea Party, right? But for the free books, here's the catch. The book officially makes its debut on June 18th, which is less than 2 weeks away. And you know, to make a book sell well these days, what you want is, you know, when people visit the page on Amazon in particular, right, Amazon.com, looking at the book, most people will buy depending on how many reviews there are, right? If there's a lot of reviews and there's 4 or 5 stars, you're going to sell a lot of books. So one of the things my publishers asked me to do is ask people to please write reviews, okay? How many of you have ever used Amazon? Quite a few of you haven't. Okay, most of the room. Okay, how many of you know that you can leave a review on Amazon, just logged in the normal way? Okay, so here's my thing. Anyone who wants to tell me, and you know, you're conservative, so I'm going to trust you. I believe you on your word. But if you honestly think you have time to read this book, and it's a lively read. You know, I wrote Economics for Dummies. I can write about policy in a way that's user-friendly for everyone and lively. But if you have time to read the book and then leave a review, say in the next month or so, please raise your hand. Okay, that's great. And I may have to go out to my car, but everyone who raised their hand a little bit later, maybe as the meeting's winding down, or maybe if you're leaving early, just come up, I'll be over here. Come grab a book and then read it, put up a review, thank you very much. Oh, actually, I should be careful here. If you like the book, leave a review, right? And if you don't like the book, don't tell your friends you don't like it. Just keep it to yourself. And then if you know someone else you could give the book to as well, who could read it and maybe review it, that would be great. And as you're about to see in the book, there's a lot there to make you very angry because our current system is massively dysfunctional. And let me end on this. We're not just spending 18% of national income on healthcare when no other country is spending more than 12. And as I told you, Singapore is only spending 4.2. So it's not just we're throwing lots of money at the system needlessly. We have horrible outcomes here. The average life expectancy in the United States, we're now 42nd in the world. We're behind really poor countries on the list, right? Infant mortality here, we are 57th in the world. Maternal mortality, we're 48th in the world. A child born here in the United States is 3.5 times as likely to die before its first birthday than a child in Singapore. And women giving birth here are 7 times more likely to die in childbirth or complications than in Singapore, right? So it's not just we're wasting money, we're literally killing people. So my other ask, if you read the book, is please pound your Congress people. I know the National Tea Party Patriots as well wants to work on healthcare this year. Please help push our political class in the right direction because the stuff you're going to get in this book, it's really unique. You know, because most health policy people, all they want to talk about is Canada and England. I actually visited Singapore several times. I know about all the US examples like Whole Foods markets. This works here. These are all our own ideas. And since it is all American, I know this is something that you all can get behind. So thank you very much.